Maria Santos had always believed that scars were just reminders of survival, not shame. At 28, she stood in the military recruitment office, her heart pounding as she filled out the final paperwork that would change her life forever. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the room filled with other hopeful recruits. Unlike them, Maria carried invisible baggage that weighed heavier than any military pack she would ever shoulder. Growing up in the rough neighborhoods of East Los Angeles, Maria learned early that life rarely offered second chances. Her father had abandoned the family when she was 7, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on a waitress salary. The apartment they lived in had thin walls, broken windows, and neighbors who minded their own business even when they should have called for help. Maria's childhood ended abruptly when her mother started bringing home men who saw a young girl as an opportunity, rather than someone to protect. The first incident happened when Maria was 12. Her mother's boyfriend, Carlos, had been drinking heavily after losing his job at the construction site. Maria remembered the smell of cheap beer and cigarettes on his breath as he cornered her in the narrow hallway between her bedroom and the bathroom. She tried to scream, but his large hand covered her mouth completely. The ceramic ashtray she grabbed from the side table connected with his temple, and blood trickled down his face as he stumbled backward. That night, Maria learned that sometimes fighting back was the only option, even when the odds were stacked against you. For years, the pattern continued. Different men, same story. Each time Maria fought, she collected bruises, cuts, and burns like other kids collected baseball cards. Her arms bore the evidence of cigarettes extinguished against her skin. Her back carried the marks of belt buckles and broken bottles. The school counselors asked questions, but Maria had perfected the art of deflection. She blamed the marks on clumsiness, on accidents, on anything except the truth that would have meant foster care and separation from her younger siblings. When Maria turned 16, she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She started working at a local gym, cleaning equipment and mopping floors in exchange for boxing lessons from an old trainer named Tommy Martinez. Tommy had been a professional boxer in his youth before a car accident ended his career. He saw something in Maria that reminded him of himself, a fighter who refused to stay down no matter how many times life knocked her to the canvas. Under Tommy's guidance, Maria discovered that her years of survival had given her something valuable, an unbreakable spirit and lightning-fast reflexes. She could read body language like a book, anticipating attacks before they came. Her hands, scarred from years of defending herself, became weapons of precision and power. Boxing gave her an outlet for the rage that had been building inside her since childhood, and more importantly, it gave her hope. The gym became Maria's sanctuary. While other teenagers were worried about prom dates and college applications, Maria was learning combinations, studying footwork, and building the kind of mental toughness that money cannot buy. Tommy never asked about the scars that covered her arms and back when she changed into her training gear. He understood that some stories were too painful to tell, and that healing happened in the ring, not in words. At 18, Maria won her first amateur boxing championship. Standing in the center of the ring with her hand raised in victory, she felt something she had never experienced before: pride in herself. The crowd was cheering for her, not because they felt sorry for her, but because she had earned their respect through skill and determination. That night she made another life-changing decision. She would join the military. The military represented everything Maria had been searching for: structure, purpose, and the chance to use her fighting skills to protect others instead of just protecting herself. She spent months preparing for the entrance exams and physical fitness tests. Her body, hardened by years of boxing training and survival, was more than ready for the physical challenges. The mental aspects came naturally to someone who had been strategizing for survival since elementary school. The day she walked into the recruitment office, Maria wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the sweltering Los Angeles heat. She had learned to hide her scars in public, not because she was ashamed of them, but because people's reactions often distracted from whatever she was trying to accomplish. The recruiter, Sergeant Williams, was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, who had seen hundreds of young people walk through those doors with dreams of military service. Sergeant Williams explained the process, the commitments and the expectations. Maria listened intently, asking intelligent questions about different career paths and training programs. She was particularly interested in military police work, drawn to the idea of protecting others who might be as vulnerable as she had once been. Her test scores were impressive, and her physical fitness evaluation results placed her in the top 5% of all recruits. As Maria signed the final documents that would officially make her a recruit in the United States Army, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Every scar on her body represented a battle she had survived, a moment when she could have given up but chose to keep fighting instead. Tommy had taught her that boxing was not about hurting people, but about having the skill and confidence to protect yourself and others when necessary. The recruitment process would take several more weeks, including medical examinations and background checks. Maria knew that the medical examination would reveal her scars, but military doctors had seen everything. They were trained to assess fitness for duty, not to judge personal histories. What mattered now was her commitment to serve her country and her ability to meet the demanding standards of military service. Walking out of the recruitment office that day, Maria felt the California sun on her face and allowed herself to smile. For the first time in her life, she was moving towards something positive instead of running away from something terrible. The military would give her the chance to turn her survival skills into something meaningful, to transform her personal battles into service for others who needed protection. She thought about her younger siblings, now old enough to take care of themselves, and about Tommy, who had helped her find strength in her struggles. Most of all, she thought about the future she was creating for herself, one where her scars would tell a story of resilience rather than victimization. The bus ride to Fort Benning, Georgia, felt like traveling to another planet for Maria Santos. She pressed her face against the window, watching the landscape change from urban sprawl to rolling hills and endless forests. The other recruits on the bus were a mix of excited chatter and nervous silence. Some were fresh out of high school, their faces smooth and unmarked by serious hardship. Others, like Maria, carried themselves with a quiet intensity that spoke of life, experiences beyond their years. Basic training began at 4:30 in the morning with the sound of drill sergeants shouting commands that seemed designed to wake the dead. Maria rolled out of her narrow bunk with military precision, having trained herself years ago to wake instantly at any sound that might signal danger. While her fellow recruits stumbled around in confusion, Maria was already dressed and ready for whatever came next. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez was a compact woman with steel gray eyes and a voice that could cut through concrete. She had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had no patience for weakness or excuses. During the first week, she systematically broke down every recruit's civilian habits and began rebuilding them into soldiers. Maria watched as some of her fellow trainees cracked under the pressure, crying into their pillows at night or calling home begging to quit. The physical training was intense but manageable for Maria. Years of boxing had prepared her for the demanding exercise routines, and her experience with pain made the discomfort bearable. What surprised her was how much she enjoyed the structure and clear expectations. For the first time in her life, she knew exactly what was expected of her and how to succeed. During the 3rd week of training, the recruits were required to undergo comprehensive medical examinations. Maria had been dreading this moment, knowing that her scars would be catalogued and questioned. She sat in the sterile medical facility wearing a standard-issue hospital gown, feeling more exposed than she had in years. The military doctor, Captain Peterson, was a middle-aged man with gentle eyes who had seen enough combat injuries to recognize the difference between battlefield wounds and domestic violence. When Maria removed her gown for the physical examination, Captain Peterson's expression remained professionally neutral, but she caught the slight tightening around his eyes. He documented each scar methodically, asking only the necessary medical questions about whether any of them affected her range of motion or caused ongoing pain. Maria answered honestly, explaining that everything had healed properly and caused no limitations. "Have you received counseling for these injuries?" Captain Peterson asked quietly, his pen poised over her medical chart. "No, sir," Maria replied. "I handled it my own way." The doctor nodded, making a note in her file. "The military offers excellent mental health resources if you ever feel you need support. There's no shame in asking for help." Maria appreciated his discretion and professionalism. In the civilian world, people often stared at her scars with morbid curiosity or pity. Captain Peterson treated them as part of her medical history, nothing more and nothing less. The weapons training phase of basic training revealed another of Maria's natural talents. Her years of boxing had given her exceptional hand-eye coordination and the ability to remain calm under pressure. She consistently scored among the highest marks in her unit for accuracy and weapon handling. The M16 rifle felt comfortable in her hands, and she understood instinctively how to maintain proper breathing and stance for optimal accuracy. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez began to take notice of Maria's performance. During a particularly challenging obstacle course exercise, Maria helped 3 fellow recruits who were struggling to complete the tasks within the time limit. She showed them techniques for climbing the rope wall more efficiently and encouraged them when their confidence faltered. Leadership, Rodriguez observed, was not about being the loudest voice but about making others around you better. The mental challenges of basic training were where Maria truly excelled. The sleep deprivation, stress positions, and psychological pressure that broke down other recruits only reminded Maria of survival tactics she had learned as a child. When Drill Sergeant Rodriguez screamed in her face about imaginary infractions, Maria remained calm and focused, drawing on years of experience in deflecting verbal abuse without losing her composure. One evening during the 7th week of training, Maria was called to Drill Sergeant Rodriguez's office. She knocked on the doorframe and stood at attention, unsure what she had done wrong. Rodriguez looked up from a stack of paperwork and gestured for Maria to sit down. "Santos, I've been watching you throughout this training cycle," Rodriguez began. "Your performance has been consistently excellent, but more importantly, you have natural leadership qualities that can't be taught." Maria remained silent, unsure how to respond to unexpected praise. "I'm recommending you for advanced infantry training and eventually officer candidate school," Rodriguez continued. "You have the potential to be an exceptional soldier and leader." The conversation lasted for 30 minutes, during which Rodriguez outlined various career paths available to Maria, based on her test scores and performance evaluations. She could pursue military police work, as originally planned, or consider more specialized fields like intelligence or special operations. Rodriguez emphasized that whatever path Maria chose, she had the support and confidence of her training cadre. Walking back to the barracks that night, Maria felt a surge of pride unlike anything she had experienced before. For the first time in her life, someone in authority was recognizing her potential, rather than just her problems. The military was not just giving her a job. It was offering her a future built on her strengths rather than defined by her past. The final weeks of basic training flew by in a blur of field exercises, ceremony rehearsals, and preparation for the next phase of military life. Maria had been selected as the honor graduate for her training company, a recognition that came with the responsibility of carrying the company flag during the graduation ceremony. On graduation day, Maria stood in formation wearing her dress blue uniform, every button polished to mirror brightness. Her family could not afford to travel from California for the ceremony, but Tommy Martinez had surprised her by making the trip. Seeing his proud face in the crowd of families brought tears to her eyes. As the graduating company marched across the parade ground, Maria carried the company flag with steady hands. Each step represented distance traveled from her old life toward something better. The scars beneath her uniform were still there, but they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her story, evidence of battles survived and strength discovered. The ceremony concluded with the traditional pinning of rank insignia and the first salute as official soldiers. Maria's new rank of private reflected just the beginning of what she hoped would be a long and successful military career. More importantly, it represented her transformation from victim to protector, from someone who fought for survival to someone who would fight for others. Fort Bragg, North Carolina became Maria's new home as she entered advanced individual training for military police. The base was massive, sprawling across thousands of acres with buildings that housed some of the Army's most elite units. Maria had requested military police training because she wanted to use her experience with violence and survival to protect others who might find themselves in dangerous situations. The military police training was more complex than basic training, focusing on law enforcement procedures, investigation techniques, and crowd control methods. Maria excelled in scenario-based training exercises, where recruits had to respond to simulated domestic violence calls, traffic stops, and base security incidents. Her instructors noted her ability to remain calm under pressure and her skill at reading body language to assess potential threats. During her 4th month at Fort Bragg, Maria received news that would test her resolve in unexpected ways. Her younger sister Elena had been arrested for drug possession back in Los Angeles. The phone call came at midnight, jarring Maria from deep sleep. Her mother's voice, slurred with alcohol and desperation, begged Maria to come home and help with legal fees and family responsibilities. Maria sat on the edge of her bunk in the darkened barracks, listening to her mother's familiar manipulation tactics. The old Maria might have felt guilty enough to abandon her military career and return to the cycle of dysfunction that had defined her childhood. The new Maria understood that she could not save people who were not ready to save themselves. "I can't come home, Mom," Maria said quietly into the phone, "but I can send some money for Elena's lawyer." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Maria's mother accused her of abandoning her family and forgetting where she came from. Maria listened patiently, then explained that her military service was not an escape from her family, but an opportunity to build something better for all of them. She promised to help financially when possible, but she would not sacrifice her future for their inability to change. Hanging up the phone, Maria felt the weight of a decision that would define her relationship with her family for years to come. She had chosen her own path over the familiar chaos of home, and while it was the right choice, it was not an easy one. The incident motivated Maria to throw herself even more deeply into her training. She volunteered for additional duties, studied law enforcement procedures during her free time, and sought out mentorship from experienced military police officers. Staff Sergeant Jackson, a 20-year veteran with multiple combat deployments, became her informal mentor and guide. Jackson had noticed Maria's potential early in the training cycle. She possessed an unusual combination of street intelligence and military discipline that made her effective in complex situations. During a simulated domestic violence response exercise, Maria demonstrated exceptional skill at de-escalating a volatile situation while maintaining officer safety protocols. "Santos, you handle these scenarios better than officers with years of experience," Jackson told her after the exercise. "What's your secret?" Maria considered her answer carefully. "I understand what fear looks like, Sergeant, and I know what it feels like to need help but be too scared to ask for it." Jackson nodded, recognizing that Maria's background, whatever it was, had given her insights that could not be taught in any classroom. He began assigning her to more challenging training scenarios and recommending her for specialized schools that would advance her career. The Advanced Military Police Course required Maria to spend 6 weeks at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, learning investigative techniques, evidence collection, and advanced patrol procedures. The training was intense, combining classroom instruction with practical exercises that simulated real-world law enforcement situations. One exercise that particularly impacted Maria involved responding to a simulated child abuse case. The scenario was designed to test officers' ability to handle sensitive situations involving vulnerable victims. As Maria interviewed the child actor playing the victim, memories of her own experiences threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. The young actress, probably around 12 years old, had been coached to display the same defensive behaviors Maria remembered from her own childhood: reluctance to make eye contact, carefully worded answers designed to avoid getting anyone in trouble, and an underlying fear that showed despite attempts to appear normal. Maria completed the exercise successfully, but that night she found herself unable to sleep. For the first time since joining the military, she considered taking advantage of the counseling services that Captain Peterson had mentioned during her medical examination. The next morning, she made an appointment with the base chaplain. Chaplain Williams was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had counseled thousands of soldiers through various personal crises. He listened without judgment as Maria told him about her childhood, her scars, and her struggle to balance her desire to help others with the emotional triggers that certain situations created. "Maria, your experiences have given you empathy and understanding that make you an exceptional military police officer," Chaplain Williams said. "But you need to take care of your own emotional well-being if you want to continue helping others effectively." The counseling sessions continued for several weeks, helping Maria develop coping strategies for dealing with difficult cases without becoming emotionally overwhelmed. She learned techniques for compartmentalizing her personal experiences while still using her insights to help victims of violence and abuse. Graduation from the Advanced Military Police Course came with Maria's promotion to Specialist in Assignment to the 503rd Military Police Battalion at Fort Bragg. Her first assignment was working base security and responding to incidents involving military personnel and their families. The work was challenging but rewarding, giving Maria the opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives. Her reputation for handling difficult situations with skill and compassion spread quickly through the battalion. Senior officers began requesting Maria for sensitive cases involving domestic violence, sexual assault, and other crimes that required investigators who could relate to victims and witnesses. Her clearance rate for case closures was among the highest in the battalion. One case that particularly tested Maria's abilities involved a young military wife who was being abused by her husband, a staff sergeant in an infantry unit. The woman, Jessica, was reluctant to press charges because she feared her husband's retaliation and worried about the impact on his military career. Maria spent hours talking with Jessica, sharing just enough of her own story to help the woman understand that staying in an abusive situation would not protect anyone. "I know it feels like you're trapped," Maria told Jessica during one of their conversations, "but you have more strength than you realize, and you have people who will help you find a way out." The case required careful coordination with social services, legal authorities, and military command structures. Maria worked tirelessly to ensure Jessica's safety while building a solid case against her abuser. When the staff sergeant was finally arrested and court-martialed, Jessica thanked Maria for giving her the courage to take action. Success in cases like Jessica's brought Maria to the attention of higher-ranking officers who were looking for military police personnel with exceptional investigative skills and leadership potential. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the battalion commander, called Maria into her office after reviewing her performance evaluations and case files. "Specialist Santos, I'm recommending you for promotion to sergeant and assignment to our Special Victims Unit," Colonel Mitchell said. "Your work has been outstanding, and I believe you have the potential for significant advancement in military law enforcement." The promotion would come with increased responsibilities and the opportunity to work on more complex cases. But it also represented recognition for the journey Maria had traveled, from an abused child to a respected military police officer. Standing in Colonel Mitchell's office, Maria felt the full weight of how far she had come and how much further she could go. 3 years into her military career, Sergeant Maria Santos had become one of the most respected investigators in the 503rd Military Police Battalion. Her promotion to sergeant had come with assignment to the Special Victims Unit, where she handled the most sensitive cases involving sexual assault, domestic violence, and crimes against children. Her ability to connect with victims while maintaining professional objectivity had made her invaluable to the unit's mission. The morning that would change everything started like any other. Maria was reviewing case files in her office when her phone rang with news of a new assignment. A high-ranking officer's family was involved in a domestic disturbance, and the situation required immediate attention from an experienced investigator. What made this case different was the location. The incident had occurred at a diplomatic reception attended by foreign military officials and members of Congress. Colonel Robert Hayes, a decorated combat veteran with over 20 years of service, had allegedly struck his wife during an argument at the reception. The incident had been witnessed by several important guests, creating both a criminal investigation and a potential diplomatic embarrassment for the military. Maria's superior, Major Patricia Sullivan, briefed her on the sensitive nature of the case. "This investigation needs to be handled with absolute professionalism and discretion," Major Sullivan explained. "Colonel Hayes has friends in high places, but that doesn't mean he's above the law. I'm assigning you to this case because you're the best investigator we have for these situations." Maria understood the implications immediately. High-ranking officers accused of domestic violence often received preferential treatment, and investigations could be influenced by political considerations rather than evidence. Her job was to conduct a thorough, impartial investigation, regardless of the subject's rank or connections. The first challenge came when Maria attempted to interview Colonel Hayes' wife, Patricia. Mrs. Hayes was an elegant woman in her 40s who had been married to a military officer long enough to understand the unwritten rules about protecting her husband's career. She initially claimed that the incident was a misunderstanding, that she had simply lost her balance and her husband had reached out to steady her. Maria recognized the defensive posture immediately. She had seen it countless times in other military wives who were torn between their own safety and their loyalty to their husband's career. The military culture often discouraged reporting domestic violence, especially when it involved senior officers whose careers affected entire families' financial security and social status. Mrs. Hayes, "I know this is difficult," Maria said gently during their private interview, "but I need you to understand that what happened at the reception was witnessed by multiple people. I'm here to help you, not to hurt your family." The conversation lasted for over 2 hours, with Maria carefully building trust and rapport. She shared general information about resources available to military families dealing with domestic violence, never pushing too hard but making it clear that Patricia Hayes had options beyond protecting her husband's reputation. Meanwhile, Maria was conducting interviews with witnesses from the diplomatic reception. The accounts were consistent. Colonel Hayes had been drinking heavily, had become increasingly agitated during dinner, and had struck his wife hard enough to knock her to the ground when she tried to calm him down. Several witnesses described the sound of the slap as loud enough to stop conversations across the room. The most compelling witness was General Amanda Morrison, a 2-star general who had been standing nearby when the incident occurred. General Morrison was known for her integrity and her advocacy for women in the military. Her statement was clear and unambiguous. Colonel Hayes had committed assault in front of dozens of witnesses, including foreign dignitaries and members of Congress. As Maria compiled her evidence, she began receiving pressure from unexpected sources. Colonel Hayes's attorney, a former military judge with significant political connections, requested meetings to discuss the case. His approach was subtle but clear. Maria was a promising young sergeant with a bright future, and making enemies of powerful people could damage her career prospects. "Sergeant Santos, you're obviously a talented investigator," the attorney said during their meeting, "but sometimes good soldiers need to understand the bigger picture. Colonel Hayes has served his country with distinction for over 2 decades. A momentary lapse in judgment at a stressful social event shouldn't destroy everything he's built." Maria listened politely but made no commitments. She had learned long ago that compromising her principles for short-term advantages never led to anything positive. Her investigation would be guided by evidence and law, not by political considerations or career calculations. The pressure intensified when Maria received a phone call from Colonel Mitchell, her former battalion commander, who had since been promoted to the Pentagon. Colonel Mitchell had always been supportive of Maria's career, making the conversation particularly uncomfortable. "Maria, I'm calling as a friend," Colonel Mitchell said. "You're walking into a situation that could damage your career. Colonel Hayes has friends who can make life very difficult for people who cross him. I'm not telling you to do anything improper, but I want you to be very careful about how you handle this case." The warning was clear, even if it was couched in terms of friendly advice. Maria thanked Colonel Mitchell for her concern, but made it clear that she intended to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation. That night, she called Chaplain Williams, who had continued to provide guidance throughout her military career. "Maria, you've come too far to compromise your integrity now," the chaplain told her. "Sometimes doing the right thing requires courage, and you've never lacked courage." The breakthrough in the case came when Patricia Hayes finally agreed to speak honestly about her marriage. During their 3rd interview, she broke down and admitted that her husband had been physically abusive for years. The incident at the diplomatic reception was simply the first time his violence had occurred in public. "I've been hiding bruises and making excuses for 15 years, Patricia Hayes said through her tears. "I told myself it was the stress of military life, that he was a good man who just lost his temper sometimes. But watching him hit me in front of all those people, seeing the shock on their faces, made me realize that what happens in our home isn't normal." Patricia Hayes' testimony provided the final piece of evidence Maria needed to recommend charges against Colonel Hayes. The case file was comprehensive, including witness statements, medical documentation of Patricia's injuries, and evidence of a pattern of domestic violence spanning more than a decade. When Maria submitted her report recommending that Colonel Hayes be charged with assault and domestic violence, she knew that her career would be affected by the decision. Officers who investigated and prosecuted senior personnel often found their advancement opportunities limited, regardless of the quality of their work or the validity of their cases. The response was swift and predictable. Maria received transfer orders to a remote assignment in Alaska, effective immediately. The official reason was operational needs, but everyone understood that she was being punished for refusing to compromise her investigation. Major Sullivan called her into the office to discuss the transfer. "Maria, I'm sorry this is happening," Major Sullivan said. "Your investigation was thorough and professional, and you did exactly what you were supposed to do. Unfortunately, sometimes the system punishes people for doing their job correctly." As Maria packed her belongings for the transfer to Alaska, she reflected on the choices that had brought her to this point. She could have compromised her investigation, protected a powerful officer's career, and continued her own advancement within the military police. Instead, she had chosen to stand up for a victim of domestic violence, knowing that it would cost her professionally. The night before her departure, Maria received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Hayes came to her quarters to thank her personally for having the courage to investigate her husband, despite the political pressure. "Because of you, I found the strength to leave him," Patricia said. "My children and I are safe now, and that's worth more than any career or reputation. You saved our lives." Standing in her empty quarters, surrounded by packed boxes, Maria understood that she had made the right choice regardless of the personal cost. Her scars had taught her about survival, but her military service had taught her about justice. Some principles were worth defending, even when it meant sacrificing personal advancement for moral integrity. Fort Richardson, Alaska, was as far from the political machinations of Fort Bragg as Maria could have imagined. The base sat in a landscape of stunning beauty and harsh conditions, where winter temperatures dropped to -40 degrees and summer brought endless daylight. Maria's assignment to the 164th Military Police Company was officially described as a promotion opportunity, but everyone understood it was professional exile. The work in Alaska was different from her previous assignments. Instead of complex investigations involving high-ranking officers, Maria found herself handling routine patrol duties, traffic violations, and the occasional bar fight in Anchorage. The pace was slower, the cases less challenging, and the opportunities for advancement limited. For an ambitious sergeant with Maria's track record, it should have been career suicide. Instead, Maria discovered something unexpected: peace. The vast wilderness surrounding the base reminded her that there was a world beyond military politics and career calculations. During her off-duty hours, she began hiking the mountain trails, learning to appreciate the silence and solitude that Alaska offered. The physical challenges of outdoor activities in extreme conditions helped her process the frustration and anger she felt about her forced transfer. Her new commanding officer, Captain James Anderson, was a practical man in his late 30s who had requested assignment to Alaska to escape his own political troubles. During Maria's first week, he called her into his office for a frank conversation about their situation. "Sergeant Santos, I know why you're here, and I know why I'm here," Captain Anderson said. "We both made the mistake of putting integrity before politics. The question is, what do we do now?" Maria appreciated his direct approach. "We do our jobs, sir. We serve the soldiers and families on this base to the best of our ability." "That's exactly the answer I was hoping for," Captain Anderson replied. "This base may be small and remote, but the work we do here matters just as much as anything happening at the Pentagon." The 164th Military Police Company was responsible for law enforcement across a huge geographical area that included several remote outposts and training facilities. Maria quickly learned that Alaska presented unique challenges: extreme weather conditions, vast distances between locations, and a population that included both military personnel and civilian contractors, working in isolation for months at a time. Her first major case in Alaska involved a missing person investigation at a remote radar station. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres had failed to report for duty and could not be located anywhere on the small base. The weather had been particularly harsh, with blizzard conditions and temperatures that could kill an unprepared person within hours. Maria led the search and rescue operation, coordinating with base personnel, civilian authorities, and Coast Guard resources. Her experience with complex investigations proved valuable, as she systematically eliminated possibilities and focused the search efforts. After 3 days of intensive searching, they found Torres in an abandoned maintenance building, suffering from severe hypothermia but alive. The investigation revealed that Torres had been struggling with depression and alcohol abuse following news of his wife's infidelity. He had wandered away from his quarters during a drinking episode and become lost in the storm. Maria's patient interview techniques helped Torres open up about his personal struggles, leading to appropriate medical treatment and counseling rather than disciplinary action. Cases like Torres's rescue began to build Maria's reputation within the Alaska military community. Her approach to law enforcement emphasized helping people solve their problems rather than simply punishing infractions. Word spread among the isolated military families that Sergeant Santos could be trusted to handle sensitive situations with discretion and compassion. The isolation of Alaska also created opportunities for professional development that would not have existed at larger bases. Maria was given responsibilities typically reserved for more senior personnel, including training new recruits, developing emergency response procedures, and coordinating with civilian law enforcement agencies across the state. During her second year in Alaska, Maria received an unexpected opportunity that would change the trajectory of her career. The Army was implementing a new program to train military police officers in advanced investigative techniques, specifically designed for remote and austere environments. Maria was selected to attend the training at Quantico, Virginia, and subsequently, to help develop curriculum for other officers facing similar challenges. The training at Quantico exposed Maria to cutting-edge investigative techniques and brought her into contact with law enforcement professionals from around the world. Her practical experience in handling complex cases under difficult conditions made her a valuable contributor to the program development process. FBI Special Agent Lisa Chen, who was helping to develop the curriculum, recognized Maria's potential immediately. During a break between training sessions, she approached Maria with an unexpected proposition. "Sergeant Santos, have you ever considered federal law enforcement as a career option?" Agent Chen asked. "The FBI is always looking for people with your combination of military experience and investigative skills." The conversation opened Maria's eyes to possibilities she had never considered. Federal law enforcement offered the opportunity to work complex cases on a national level, with resources and authority that surpassed anything available in military police work. More importantly, it represented a career path where her integrity and investigative skills would be valued, rather than seen as political liabilities. Upon returning to Alaska, Maria began researching federal career opportunities while continuing her duties with renewed enthusiasm. Her work had attracted attention from senior officers who were not connected to the political networks that had derailed her advancement at Fort Bragg. Colonel Patricia Williams, the Alaska District Commander, called Maria to her office to discuss her future. "Sergeant Santos, your performance in Alaska has been exceptional," Colonel Williams said. "I am recommending you for promotion to Staff Sergeant and assignment to the Criminal Investigation Division. It's time your talents were properly utilized." The promotion and CID assignment represented vindication for Maria's principled stand in the Colonel Hayes case. Criminal Investigation Division work would allow her to return to complex cases involving serious crimes, with the authority and resources necessary to conduct thorough investigations. As Maria prepared for her new assignment, she reflected on her time in Alaska and how it had shaped her perspective on career and purpose. The professional exile that was meant to punish her had instead given her the opportunity to develop skills and relationships that would serve her throughout her career. The harsh beauty of Alaska had also helped her process the emotional challenges of her childhood and early military service. The physical demands of outdoor activities in extreme conditions had pushed her beyond her perceived limitations, while the solitude had given her space to understand her own motivations and goals. More importantly, her work in Alaska had reinforced her belief that law enforcement should be about helping people rather than simply enforcing rules. Every case she had handled, from missing persons to domestic disputes, had reminded her that behind every incident was a human story that deserved compassion and understanding. The phone call that would lead to the most significant moment of her military career came on a cold February morning during her final month in Alaska. Major General Patricia Hayes, no relation to the colonel she had investigated, was calling from the Pentagon with an unusual request. "Sergeant Santos, I'm organizing a special task force to investigate allegations of abuse within military training facilities," General Hayes explained. "Your reputation for integrity and thorough investigations has come to my attention. I'd like you to consider joining this task force as a senior investigator. The assignment would require Maria to investigate cases involving drill sergeants, training cadre, and other personnel in positions of authority over recruits and junior soldiers." It was exactly the kind of sensitive, high-profile work that had led to her exile to Alaska. But this time, she was being specifically recruited for her unwillingness to compromise her principles. The Pentagon assignment brought Staff Sergeant Maria Santos back to the corridors of military power, but this time as a valued investigator rather than a political liability. Major General Patricia Hayes had assembled a task force of the Army's most experienced and trustworthy investigators to address growing concerns about abuse within military training environments. Maria's reputation for thorough, uncompromising investigations had made her an essential member of the team. The task force office was located in a secure section of the Pentagon, reflecting the sensitive nature of their work. Maria's colleagues were seasoned investigators from various military police units, each selected for their track record of integrity and professional competence. The cases they handled involved allegations of physical abuse, sexual misconduct, and psychological harassment within basic training facilities across the Army. One of their first major investigations took the task force to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where multiple recruits had alleged that drill sergeants were using excessive force and creating an environment of fear that went beyond normal military training stress. Maria was assigned as the lead investigator on the case, working with a team that included criminal investigators, medical personnel, and legal experts. The investigation required delicate handling because it involved questioning the fundamental culture of military training. Drill sergeants were expected to be demanding and forceful in preparing recruits for the stresses of military service, but the line between tough training and abusive behavior was sometimes unclear. Maria's job was to determine where that line had been crossed. During her interviews with recruits who had filed complaints, Maria recognized behaviors and responses that reminded her of her own experiences with abuse. The recruits displayed the same defensive postures, carefully worded responses, and underlying fear that she had seen in domestic violence victims throughout her career. More troubling, some recruits were reluctant to provide details because they feared retaliation from training staff. The breakthrough in the case came when Maria interviewed Private Jennifer Walsh, a 19-year-old recruit from Ohio who had been hospitalized after a training incident. Walsh had initially claimed that her injuries resulted from a fall during an obstacle course exercise, but medical evidence suggested that her wounds were inconsistent with a simple fall. "Jennifer, I know you're scared," Maria said during their private interview at the hospital, "but I need you to understand that what happened to you was not part of normal military training." The conversation required patience and skill that Maria had developed through years of working with trauma victims. She shared enough of her own background to help Walsh understand that she truly understood what it meant to be afraid of people in positions of authority. "I grew up in a house where I learned to be careful about what I said and how I acted, because the wrong words could lead to pain," Maria told Walsh. "The military should never feel like that kind of house." Walsh eventually revealed that Drill Sergeant Marcus Thompson had singled her out for particularly harsh treatment because she had complained about his inappropriate comments toward female recruits. The training accident had actually been Thompson throwing Walsh against a concrete wall hard enough to cause internal injuries that required surgery. The investigation expanded as other recruits came forward with similar stories about Thompson and two other drill sergeants who had created a culture of abuse within the training company. Maria's team documented a pattern of behavior that included physical assault, sexual harassment, and psychological intimidation tactics that were designed to break down recruits rather than build them up. The evidence was overwhelming, but prosecuting drill sergeants for abuse was complicated by the military's traditional reluctance to second-guess training methods. Maria knew that her report would face scrutiny from officers who might view any criticism of drill sergeant methods as an attack on military tradition and effectiveness. Major General Hayes called Maria into her office after reviewing the preliminary findings of the Fort Jackson investigation. The general was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, who had risen through the ranks by being both brilliant and politically astute. Staff Sergeant Santos, your investigation has uncovered serious problems that we cannot ignore, General Hayes said, but I need to prepare you for the resistance we're going to face. There are people in this building who will argue that tough training requires tough methods. Maria understood the implications. Even with compelling evidence, prosecuting the drill sergeants would require support from senior leadership, who might be reluctant to acknowledge systematic problems within military training. Her job was to present the facts clearly and let the evidence speak for itself. The formal presentation of findings took place in a Pentagon conference room filled with generals, colonels, and senior civilian officials. Maria stood at the front of the room in her dress uniform, every ribbon and badge polished to perfection. Her presentation was methodical and professional, laying out the evidence without emotional rhetoric or personal opinions. As she described the pattern of abuse documented at Fort Jackson, Maria noticed that several officers in the room seemed uncomfortable with the implications of her findings. Colonel Robert Sterling, a veteran infantry officer, interrupted her presentation with a challenge. Staff Sergeant Santos, don't you think you might be misinterpreting normal training stress as abuse? Colonel Sterling asked. Military training is supposed to be difficult and demanding. The question was designed to undermine Maria's credibility by suggesting that she did not understand military training standards. Maria had anticipated this challenge and was prepared with a measured response. Sir, I understand the difference between demanding training and criminal abuse, Maria replied calmly. Drill Sergeant Thompson's actions resulted in recruits requiring medical treatment for injuries that had nothing to do with legitimate training objectives. The exchange continued for several minutes, with Colonel Sterling attempting to minimize the significance of the findings, and Maria systematically addressing each of his concerns with documented evidence. Other officers in the room began to recognize that Maria's investigation was thorough and professionally conducted. General Morrison, the two-star general who had witnessed the Colonel Hayes incident years earlier, finally ended the debate with a simple statement. Staff Sergeant Santos has presented clear evidence of criminal behavior. Our responsibility is to address it, not to defend it. The aftermath of the presentation moved quickly. The 3 drill sergeants involved in the abuse were arrested and court-martialed. Major changes were implemented in drill sergeant training and oversight procedures. Most importantly for Maria, her work was recognized as exemplifying the kind of professional competence and moral courage that the Army needed in its investigators. The recognition came in an unexpected form. Maria was called to attend a Pentagon ceremony, where she would receive the Army Commendation Medal for her work on the task force. The ceremony was held in a large auditorium, filled with military personnel and civilian officials. As Maria stood at attention, waiting to receive her award, she was told to remove her dress blue jacket as part of the ceremony protocol. The request seemed unusual, but she complied without question, standing in her white dress shirt in front of hundreds of military personnel. The moment her jacket was removed, her scars became visible through the thin fabric of her shirt. The roadmap of cigarette burns, knife cuts, and other marks that covered her arms and shoulders were clearly outlined beneath the white material. A murmur went through the assembled crowd as people recognized what they were seeing. General Morrison, who was presenting the award, stepped forward and looked at Maria's scars for a long moment. The auditorium fell completely silent as the general processed what he was seeing. Then, in a gesture that surprised everyone present, General Morrison stepped back and rendered a slow, deliberate salute to Maria. The salute was not part of the ceremony protocol, but its meaning was clear to everyone in the room. General Morrison was acknowledging not just Maria's professional accomplishments, but the personal journey that had brought her to this moment. Her scars were not a source of shame, but evidence of battles survived and strength discovered. The entire auditorium followed General Morrison's lead, rising to their feet and saluting Maria in recognition of her courage, both personal and professional. Standing there in her white shirt with her scars visible to hundreds of military personnel, Maria felt a sense of completion that she had never experienced before. After the ceremony, General Morrison approached Maria privately to explain his actions. Staff Sergeant Santos, I've seen a lot of combat wounds in my career, but I've never seen scars that told a story of such personal courage. You've turned your survival into service to others, and that deserves recognition. The ceremony marked the beginning of a new chapter in Maria's career, one where her background and experiences were seen as strengths rather than obstacles. She continued her work with the task force, investigating cases of abuse and helping to reform military training practices. Her story became an inspiration to other soldiers who had overcome difficult backgrounds to serve with distinction.